Okay, it's been a while since I've done anything with this channel, former cult member. I was in a cult for about 20 years, I guess, two cults, or Cult 1.0 and Cult 2.0. The cult actually, the leader of the cult left or was kicked out of the cult in around 2002, and then he started another cult based on the doctrines of the first cult. So yeah, so I put here jump ship to Cult 2.0. So let's begin at the start. So 1995, I'd just left university. I got a degree. I got a job. Life was all right. Life was all right. I had a degree. These were the days when degrees were free. The government actually gave you a grant and paid for your university course. So yeah, it's a while ago, isn't it? So yeah, I got my degree, and it was January 1995. I was at a shopping centre in Farnborough called Princessmead, Farnborough, Hampshire, and I had just bought a computer magazine. I think it was PC Zone, and I think it had Doom 2 on the cover disc. And what I'd used to do at work, I'd sort of put in the cover disc and play some of the demo games for lunch break. And yeah, that's one thing I like doing. So it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday afternoon, and it was January, and yeah, as I said, I'd walked into town, got my magazine. My plan was to just go back home again. My dad usually would make like a burger or something for lunch. So I'd come back, have a burger for lunch, and just chill out over the weekend and then go back to work on the Monday. But yeah, this particular Saturday, there was this bloke near the exit of Princessmead, where it goes around to Asda. Yeah, and I always remember this thought in my head after I'd bought my computer magazine. I think I bought it from either Game or WH Smith, and I was thinking, okay, do I really want to walk through Queensmead, to get home, or should I walk round the back of Asda, which might be quicker? And there used to be a sports centre in Farnborough. They knocked it down a few years ago, so I thought, okay, why don't I walk via the sports centre and walk home? I used to walk past the council offices, up past the runway, and then I'd be home. So yeah, I lived near what is now Farnborough Airport. So yeah, this guy was standing by the back door, and he said to me, "Excuse me there, are you local to the area?" And I sort of looked at him. I remember he had a sort of black jacket on, glasses. He was a bit bald, and he was a sort of, looked to me like a bit of an older brother kind of thing. And I said, "Yeah, I'm local to the area." And he was holding what looked like a clipboard and a Bible, a blue 1984 NIV Bible. And he said to me, "Do you believe in God?" And I thought, oh, okay, there's a bit of an odd question. So I says to him, "Yeah, I believe in God." And he says, "Do you go to church?" And I says, "Well, I used to go to church, not so much these days. I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas." And we started a conversation. And in the conversation, he was quite persuasive and quite sort of extrovert, And he said, "Oh, well, maybe you'd like to come along to a church service and a Bible study." And I thought, go on then. I thought he seemed quite an interesting chap. And he asked me what I did for work, and I says I was an engineer. And he said, "Oh, what, computing?" And he said, "Oh, I know somebody who's a computer programmer." And I thought, okay, it's not, maybe I'll go just socially, maybe I'll meet some new people or whatever. And we swapped telephone numbers, and he was kind enough to say, "Oh, he'd give me a lift. Give me a lift. Do you want a lift to the church?" Because I didn't know exactly where it was. He mentioned it was somewhere in Cove, but he says, "Oh, I can give you a lift in the car if you want tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, okay then." And the conversation ended with, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, 9:30." So I gave him my telephone number, told him where I lived, completely trusting of this random stranger. But he seemed like an older brother to me, quite friendly, quite chatty, somebody you could trust, And he was in a cult, and he was a cult recruiter, but I didn't know that. I really didn't know anything about cults. So I walked home, and as I walked home, I thought, do I really want to go to a church tomorrow? Maybe I'll ring him up later and cancel. But what he wrote his name. He wrote his name and his number on a little piece of paper. All right, I'll tell you the first few digits. 0134475 something. All right, and that was his telephone number. He lived in Sandhurst, a little 2 up, 2 down, on a place called Isis Way. I knew that because I would be going there the next evening. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll ring him up. But I'd lost his little piece of paper, And I thought, oh, damn, he's going to come round tomorrow. But anyway, I thought, in my mind, I imagined, I thought it might have been at the sixth form college in Cove. That's where I imagined. I thought that's where he was saying where it was. But it wasn't actually there. And I thought it would be boring. I'd been raised a Catholic. I'd stopped going to Catholic church because I found it boring. And so the next morning, Sunday morning, he came round bright and early. I think it was 9 o'clock, 9:30, knocked on the door. My dad answered the door. He invited my dad to church, which I thought was a bit cheeky. And, my dad called up. I was upstairs. And he said, so I won't mention his name because he left the cult. He said, oh, what's his name's here? And then I came down the stairs all ready. And I said to my dad, okay, I'll see you later. And I remember this guy. He had a old red Ford Escort, D-plate red Ford Escort. And, he parked outside the house. And I got in the car. And there were 2 other guys in the car, 2 other church members. And they called, and they, I remember their names. There was the guy who was the other computer programmer, like me, and there was another guy as well. So there was 4 of us in this red Ford Escort, and off we went to this, they'd rented a room in a school in Cove, and when we chatted, they introduced themselves to me, and all very polite, all very nice. So we arrived at this sort of car park where this school was, and I thought, well, this doesn't look like a church. This is, I was expecting something like a church building, or a hall. And so we went up the stairs into this school, and there was probably about, 30, 40 people, in this sort of classroom, emptied out classroom that they'd rented for their Sunday service. I was introduced to different people. This is Joe, this is Jack, whoever. And there were some good looking women there as well, I must say. There were some black people, white people, Asian people, old people, young people. It was a real mixed bag of people. And, then the singing started, and the singing was really good. Really charismatic, extrovert, happy clappy singing. A really sort of high energy church, completely unlike Catholic Mass that I'd been used to. And I'm aware of time, 9 minutes, okay. I didn't check whether this channel is 15-minute plus. If it isn't, I might put a number on it so I can get longer videos. But anyway, so the singing started, and they were all friendly, all nice, and then they did what is known as a Paul talk. So it was a Christian based cult, Bible based cult. and they did a talking about, you know, collecting money for their charity and doing work with the poor. Then there was a communion, and then there was a sermon. And the sermon was done by this Welsh guy, ex-army Welsh guy, and he was talking about different things like lust and stuff like that. And the sermon altogether, after some more singing at the end, I think it was from about 10 o'clock till about 12:30. So it was a long old service. I was used to half an hour Sunday morning mass, you know, not a lot, maybe one or two songs if you're lucky, but they were all so friendly. They were all so friendly. So that was my first ever experience with a cult, and I didn't know it was a cult. Yeah. So just take it from the top. So they invited me, the guy invited me, it was just him. Usually they go out in twos or threes, but it was just him this particular time. And this was at this shopping centre. He offered to give me a lift. We swapped numbers. He came around the next day. We went to this meeting place, which was, they'd rented a classroom in a school. And the church service, really good singing, very good fellowship, very friendly, wanted to get to know me. There were another couple of people there who were known as visitors. So you were either a member, which they called being a disciple, and they'd sort of say, hey bro, or hey sis, you know, if you were a man or a woman. So they called themselves brothers and sisters, and they called themselves disciples. And they used a lot of these Americanisms, you know, the funny, everything was awesome or fired up, you know, and they gave these funny sideways hugs, and all very friendly, all very friendly. So that was the first church service. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about, we went to lunch together, and then in the evening, there were the first of several Bible studies. And the Bible studies is where they get you. You know, people might use the word thought reform, indoctrination, brainwashing. It's the Bible studies. That's how they do it. They twist your mind with these Bible studies. So we'll do that in the next video.